Recently I acquired this. This is a Getzen 3047 AFR Custom Series tenor trombone. And it is a trombone that I acquired in absolutely abysmal condition, but I've managed to make it work, and I'm delighted to show it to you today. So let's start with this, with a physical inspection of the instrument. There's quite a few patches of lacquer wear. There were quite a few patches of red rot beginning, which I fixed up with some elbow grease and vinegar, which I promptly spilled all over my bench. That smell is still not gone away. It has a Axial Flow rotary valve, otherwise known as a Thayer valve, which is this triangular arrangement here. It has a rose brass coloured bell attached to a yellow brass coloured rest of the instrument. It's fully disassemblable, and it is done so by these little screws here, so we can remove the entire bell section, change that out if we wanted to. We can disassemble all of the internal componentry here, and by replacing this tube here we could make it a straight tenor trombone if we had that desire. Now the Thayer valves are sort of the utmost refinement of the valve system that you can have on a trombone. See, it is designed to have the minimal amount of sharp bends involved with it, and so the airflow naturally goes straight through the instrument in this tube here. It comes right slightly at an angle and then goes out the rest of the instrument, or if you rotate the valve by depressing the trigger, it will instead go slightly further around to this tube here, and then through the valve, through this bend here, which is the only sort of sharp bend, and then back through to this part here. And it is, as I said, about as good as you can get. It doesn't stop the fact that there are some additional bends. We've got this 180-degree loop up the top, and we've got this sort of contraption along here, but it is about as good as it gets. It's not my preferred trigger system though. I personally think that Hagman valves are my favourite to play on, but Thayer valves are right up there. So what do I think about this instrument? It's actually quite different to what I expected. I've tried a number of different mouthpieces with it, and they've given me sort of quite different results. If I use a very small mouthpiece such as a Dennis Wax 6BL or something along those lines, it actually becomes very difficult to transition from quiet notes to loud notes without restarting that note. So if you wanted to start a note and crescendo to a loud note, you'd sort of hit this wall halfway between the dynamics, and it wouldn't really want you to go any further. But of course you could start a note loud and play it loud. You could start a note quiet, but just transitioning without re-articulating was something that was really weird. If I change to a bigger mouthpiece, I've got on here a Dennis Wax 4AL, or even a bigger 2AL or something like that, it works seemingly fine, but that was something I've never encountered on a trombone before. It has an 8.5-inch bell, but it doesn't give a naturally warm, full sound. It is a trombone that would perhaps be more suited to brass band use than orchestral use, because it's very easy to get that edge. It's very difficult to get a loud, full note that doesn't have any sort of rasp to it. And so it's not necessarily going to be perfectly situated to every example that we come across. Some of the other things about this trombone is that the distance you have to move the valve, it's not excessive, but when you've got large mitts like mine, and when you prefer to have your second finger on the top side of this brace here, it suddenly becomes quite difficult to move the valve the way, the full distance of its throw. It sort of gets, your hand starts getting in the way. That's partly my fault because of how I prefer to hold the trombone, but it would have been nice for this trombone to have a little bit less of a throw. You have to move the trigger quite far. The last thing that I'll mention today is the slide. The slide is quite heavy compared to some of the other trombones that I've used. The slide is very smooth, it's very nice, it's a good slide, but the weight of the metals is a little bit more than what I was expecting. So I have to my right here my King 7B bass trombone. The slide on this is much lighter than the slide is on this, and that sort of comes down to personal preference. The difference between wagging your arm around when it's got a slide that's a fraction heavier on it as opposed to a slide that's a little bit lighter, then yeah, it's not a consequential difference, but it is something that I noticed. You'd expect a tenor trombone to be lighter, have a lighter weight of slide than a bass trombone, but all the same. But it's not the case in this particular example. So that was something that surprised me a little bit. But that's really all there is to say about this trombone. It's a beautiful instrument. It plays very well. There's a bit of a learning curve to get used to this particular instrument because it has some of those idiosyncrasies that I've talked about in the video. But when you've got the right combination of instrument and mouthpiece, it works brilliantly. It's a lovely instrument. Thanks for watching.